Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on Boxing. So this weekend, the 154-pound division is kicking some ass. Luckily for us boxing fans, we're getting some big fights. One of those happens to be a unification fight. So let's talk about that card first, and then we'll be talking about the other fight as well. So this week, coming out of Puerto Rico as part of a Top Rank promoted card, we have, of course, Xander Zayas, the young Puerto Rican fighter, who currently is the WBO 154-pound world champion. He, in his first defense of his title, I think, is going to be defending against WBA world champion Barao Abbas, the German fighter who just won his title recently as well. Actually, both of them won in very, strongly contested, entertaining fights to become world champions. And now in their first title defenses, they're going to be matching up against one another. And that's great. Like, these two guys are obviously not the biggest names in the 154-pound division. So how do you make yourself as relevant as possible? Do what everyone else isn't doing. Something Funduro, who was actually the unified champion, didn't do, which was defend his title, which is why he was stripped and why Xander Zayas became the WBO champion by blatantly ducking his mandatory, Xander Zayas. So now Zayas is doing what many of those fighters have failed to do in their careers, which is actually unify. And this is going to be a good fight. Abbas is a real aggressive pressure fighter, obviously getting better and better as, each fight progresses. And Xander Zayas, who really came out of the gate with a lot of promise, was really talked about as being the next great Puerto Rican fighter, had a few health issues that sort of sidetracked his career for a little bit, but then obviously got back on track. Hasn't been the knockout power he was obviously early in his career against limited opposition. And obviously early on in his career, he also had a bit of a gas tank issue. He'd start fights quick, but kind of tail off at the end. Obviously, these are things that he's improved on as he's moved forward. And still being a very young fighter at only 24 years old, he's a guy that more than 6 months ago on my channel, I was praising as potentially one of the best fighters in the division. And a lot of the people that follow my channels weren't really fans of Xander Zayas. A lot of the comments towards him were very critical and very negative. People, of course, were giving a lot of praise to other fighters, but not really giving Xander Zayas any push at all. But so it's even better to see him actually stepping in to take on Abbas, which should be a very entertaining fight and a very good style matchup. You have a boxer, a mover against a pressure fighter. So a very fun fight. As far as the card overall, not a bad card. Rohan Polanco is going to be on the card, one of the most exciting up-and-coming 147-pound fighters. Giovanni Santillan, obviously a guy that was previously a top fighter at 147 pounds, is also in this card. And young fighter Yuri Sendeno is also in the card. So it should be fun. It should be entertaining. But obviously the creme of the crop for this card is the unification fight for the WBA and WBO 154-pound title. So that's great. And keeping that same energy. This is what we ask all fighters to do. Like, regardless of who they are, people want to see this level of competition. They want to see great fighters match up against other great fighters. They want to see people unify titles to prove how good they really are. And the only reason you can find this out is when guys actually take on the challenge. So good for these guys to actually do that, to take on the challenge. I'm really intrigued to see how that's going to pan out. This channel I have to cancel because they just post so many things that my phone is fucking popping all the time. And the pictures and stuff are nice, but of course the information is all from Uzbekistan, so I don't know what the hell they're talking about. But obviously it's good to see what's going on as far as amateur and professional Uzbek boxing, right? You got to keep in touch with these kind of fighters by being on these kind of feeds, but this feed just bombards my phone, blows it up consistently. So yeah, Bye. Bye for now. Let's get to the other big fight. This is, it's interesting enough that people love to highlight certain fights, but then they just ignore many of the other great fights that are happening. Like, obviously, this fight is a unification fight. If you're a real boxing fan, and especially if you follow the division, you should be really intrigued to see how this plays out. Because obviously, the winner of this is going to have two of the four titles at the division and is going to be a real player in the 154-pound weight class. But people are more focused on fights that aren't happening, like Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz, right? And the reality is, even if that fight did happen, it's not really that legitimate because there's no titles on the line anyway. Neither of those guys are currently world champions at 154 pounds. But people just love to dick ride certain fighters and then just ignore boxing as a whole. It's kind of sad, but it is what it is. Then, of course, we have the IBF world champion who's defending his world title as well. It's ironic because on BoxRec his name's not listed because he's been so inactive, but the guy he's fighting is listed. How does that match up? So I have to click on Josh Kelly, but I can't find the champion that Josh Kelly's going to fight. Crazy. But out of the UK, on Eddie Hearn Matchroom card, obviously Bakram Murtazaliev is defending his IBF 154-pound world title this weekend as well. So it's great for this 154-pound division, especially having two big fights on one night. And the funny thing is, potentially the way everything is unfolding, you could potentially see the winner of Murtazaliev Kelly face the winner of Xander Zayas versus Abbas to win 3 of the 4 world titles in that division. Obviously, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom are hoping that the winner of Murtazaliev and Kelly face Boots Ennis next, right? To give Boots Ennis an opportunity to become a 2-weight world champion and win that IBF title at 154 pounds, which, as their promoter, that should really be the push. Because for Boots, getting a title at that weight class is going to give him a lot of leverage moving forward in negotiation with other fighters in the weight class. But, Murtazaliev, Kelly, it's an intriguing style matchup. Kelly was a very highly rated amateur fighter who came out of the amateurs with a very exciting sort of Roy Jones-esque type of style, right? Technically, obviously a good fighter, but a guy who relied so much more on his athleticism. And then, of course, the first time he stepped up into a big fight, he was kind of manhandled by a very good fighter. Obviously, a guy who's gives lots of guys tough fights throughout his career, David Avician, who ended up stopping him in 6 rounds back in 2021. Since then, he's went on sort of the UK challenge, beating, multiple fighters, guys like Ishmael Davis, obviously guys like Troy Williamson as well. Ended up polishing off 7 fights since 2021 when he ended up losing to Avician. And the irony is, this fight wasn't that much of a shock because we saw him struggle against Ray Robinson back in 2019. And Ray's always a tough fight, very tall and very long fighter, able to control distance very well. So any fight with him was always going to be complicated, and that fight ended up a draw, and many people felt that Robinson kind of got fucked over in that fight, and that only because Josh Kelly was the bankable fighter, he ended up getting the victory. Murtazaliev's been kind of in the same situation. This is a guy who's been kind of underestimated and basically ignored for the majority of his career. He was a Charlo mandatory for years, and they put him on undercard fights for the PBC. They even put him on undercard fights, but didn't even put him on the main part of the pay-per-view cards, but put him on the prelim fight cards. So literally nobody got to see this guy fight. This is when he was fighting, man, guys like Gray and Manny Woods and Jorge Fortea. Obviously serviceable guys to stay busy against, but not the kind of opponents that are going to get you good paydays, not even the kind of fighters that are going to get you any recognition. And he didn't really get recognition. Beat Robert Valenzuela Jr., and then obviously beat Jack Calquet, a guy who previously beat Abbas. So, there's a common opponent right there. He beat Jack Calquet, stopping him in the 11th round, which elevated him to the IBF world title. Obviously, his first title defense was versus Tim Tszyu. And thanks to Tim Tszyu's recognition, that was the first time that Bakram Murtazaliev really got a lot of attention. And his name kind of meant something. But in saying that, that fight happened in 2024. He did not fight once in 2025, and only now is getting a fight in 2026. Obviously, the beginning of the year, but nonetheless, it's been that long for a world champion to kind of be ignored, looked past, looked over. And there's been a lot of guys that were talking about wanting world title fights, but none of them were very interested in taking on Bakram Murtazaliev. Going into this weekend's fight, there's obviously a lot of UK fans that would love to see Josh Kelly sort of reinvent himself, pull out a fantastic performance, and become a world champion. Because then obviously you have a lot of big money fights available for him, and it really brings a little bit of intrigue to the division. Whereas Bakram Murtazaliev obviously doesn't speak English. He's not the most colorful, charismatic character. So if he's not destroying guys and knocking the crap out of them, and just winning competitive fights, he's not nearly as marketable. Obviously, if he's able to beat Josh Kelly the way he beat Tim Tszyu in such a devastating fashion, that would be great for him. Then he really starts becoming a bit of a boogeyman in the 154-pound division. And it'll be interesting to see what opportunities fall into his lap if he does look sensational in this weekend's matchup. But as a hardcore boxing fan, and obviously somebody who's intrigued to see how the 154-pound division sort of keeps moving forward and how it ends up turning out, it's great to see 3 world champions fighting this weekend. Obviously, I think all 3 of them deserve the opportunity to stay busy, continue to make money, continue to build their careers and market themselves. Even if they're not the biggest name fighters in the division, what they are guys that actually have done what they're supposed to do, right? Went through the proper channels, earned the world title fights, ended up coming through, even if maybe they weren't favored or weren't really the promoter's fighter that people were hoping would win, but nonetheless still ended up winning. And now, thanks to that effort, determination, they're all world title holders. And obviously, it's going to be interesting to see moving into the rest of 2026 how everything unfolds and what exactly is going to happen to guys like Funduro, guys like obviously Boots Ennis, and obviously guys like Virgil Ortiz, to name a few of the big players in the division. But let me know in the comment section below, what's your prediction on these fights? I'm leaning towards Xander Zayas to win a close decision versus Abbas. I do think he's the better overall boxer, and for the majority of the fight will be able to control distance and range. But I do think Abbas is a good enough fighter that he's going to have a lot of really good moments. So I wouldn't be surprised if potentially this fight ends up being a majority decision or a split decision, with Xander Zayas becoming a unified world champion. And the best Puerto Rican fighter in boxing today, maybe. You have obviously the small fighter who's currently on some people's pound for pound list to contend with as well. And then as far as Bakram Murtazaliev, I like Josh Kelly and I had high expectations for him, but what Abbas said about him I think is kind of true. He doesn't think he's got the toughness, right, the resilience to beat a guy like Murtazaliev, who obviously is going to come in really hungry to impress, especially being out of the ring for a year now. And I do think that Kelly, well, he's a super entertaining fight, very dynamic. I just think he's not that physically resilient. And we saw that when he got beat by David Avician, getting stopped in 6 rounds. If he really had that dog and that toughness in him, I think he would have been able to take that fight 12 rounds. Still obviously lose the fight, but show you that he had the ring IQ and the toughness to find a way to survive and last in a fight of that magnitude. And because of that, I don't really see him being able to go the distance with Bakram Murzalia. I do think Murzalia is going to finish him off, get rid of him, and potentially sleep him. And if that's the case, hey, all the better. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I like exciting fights. So I wouldn't be sad if Josh Kelly pulled out the incredible victory either. As far as the card, it's nothing to write home about. Josh Padley's fighting on the card, but outside of him, there's really nobody that American boxing fans are going to have any fucking idea who they are. So this card is really being sold to the UK fans. Because there's dudes that, yeah, even I, who follows boxing globally, have no idea who those fucking guys are. It's not the most entertaining of cards for sure. I definitely won't be waking up Saturday night to watch that fight card. So hopefully it's exciting so I can watch it on replay. But once again, let me know in the comment section below what's your prediction on the Murzalia Kelly fight and the Xander Zayas versus Abbas fight. Who do you think is going to win and how? And what would you like to see the winners do next? Obviously, the most likely result with regards to the IBF title is potentially a Boots Ennis fight. And if that's the case, that's great, because Boots Ennis definitely deserves an opportunity to fight for a world title at 154 pounds. For the WBO title and the WBA title, it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward with regards to those titles. I would expect that probably somebody's mandatory would be the first potential defense for whoever wins that. And obviously, I'm picking Xander Zayas to win by close decision. So I figure he's going to have to take on either the WBA mandatory or the WBO mandatory, but we will see. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I will see you this weekend live.